Coming to you live from the Tino Studios in Minooka, Illinois. I'm your host, Bucky Shanks, and this is Tino Tonight. Welcome everybody to the Week 6 edition of Tino Tonight. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The number one team in the nation has yet again been knocked off. You have to go back to Week 2 for the last time the number one ranked team won. The top 25 didn't fare so well this week either, going 13-12. Expect some major shakeup in the rankings later tonight. And as usual, around this time each week, we do the squeak of the week. This week will be no different. West Virginia went on the road to Fort Worth, Texas to meet the Horned Frogs in a battle of 2 and 3 teams. Both teams desperately trying to get back to 500. The Mountaineers came up short in this one by a score of 914.40 to 899.20. The 15.20 point game is the 11th closest game in Tino history. And as we know, it's a short history, but history nonetheless. And that brings us to the beatdown of the week. For Clemson, after losing 2 straight, I said on last week's show, no better time for a slump buster as winless North Carolina is next. Not only did they take advantage of the Tar Heels, they put them on beatdown of the week. Clemson went on the road and they were all business as they absolutely eviscerated North Carolina 1,027.10 to 679.35. The 347.75 win is the second most lopsided victory in league history. The site will show third on the list, but we are not acknowledging any margin of victory records involving tanking teams. And that brings us to Stock Watch, and this week's mover and shaker is LSU. We again only get to feature one team this week, as they were the only team with back-to-back wins versus ranked opponents. At this week's staff meeting, we might have to discuss the criteria. But back to the lecture at hand, channeling my inner Snoop Dogg. Week 5, they took down the number 21 ranked Florida Gators and followed that up with a Week 6 win versus number 7 Vanderbilt. LSU also boasts a 3-1 record versus ranked opponents, as well as sitting 1-0 versus the top 10. Last but not least, they also remain perfect in conference play with a sparkling 4-0 record. And that brings us to the top 25. Checking in at number 25, Wisconsin, 3-3. After a tough loss to number 19, Michigan State in Week 5, the Badgers bounced back with a low-scoring win over Maryland in Week 6. The rest of the committee must be rewarding past performance because it seemed to me that Texas was more deserving after beating number 6 Kansas. But I digress. Wisconsin improves to 2-2 in the conference. Penn State is up next. Number 24, Michigan State, 3-3. We stay in the Big Ten. After beating up the Pac-12 in non-conference play, the Spartans aren't having nearly the same amount of fun in conference play as they drop to 1-3 in the Big Ten. The loss last week to Ohio State put them 1-2 versus ranked opponents. Michigan State has never been unranked to this point, but a loss to Purdue this week could change that. Number 23, Iowa State, 3-3. Fresh off putting up the high point total last week and the 266-point thumping of number 22 Baylor, the Cyclones find themselves in the top 25. That win also got their record back to even versus ranked teams as they improved to 2-2 and was their first in conference play. Iowa State takes on Texas Tech in Week 7. Number 22 NC State, 4-2. After whipping number 10 Virginia Tech by 213 points last week, the Wolfpack rejoined the top 25, improved to 3-1 in ACC play, and improved to 2-0 versus ranked teams. The 4-2 record is surprising considering they have more points against them than for them. Nonetheless, they continue to play well against who was in front of them. They look to make it 2 straight next week versus Wake Forest. Number 21, Georgia Tech, 3-3. The Yellow Jackets are the highest ranked 3-3 team in the country, improved their winning streak to 3 games, and remain yellow hot. You see what I did there? Stop it, Bucky. The win also improves Georgia Tech to 3-1 in conference play, tied with 3 others. After being left for dead starting the year 0-3, the Yellow Jackets look to make it 4 straight and remain at the top of the ACC in Week 7. Up next is Miami, who has recently found success scoring over 1,000 points in back-to-back wins. Number 20, Texas Tech 4-2. Last week I said a lot of questions surrounding this team, and we would get answers as they had Oklahoma on deck. Well, the 266-point massacre helped paint a little bit clearer picture. Like NC State, they're 4-2 due to quite a bit of luck, as this team also has more points against than for. 0-2 versus the top 25, but 3-1 in the Big 12. The Red Raiders have Iowa State next. Number 19, Virginia Tech, 4-2. After winning 3 straight, the Hokies didn't even crack 800 points in Week 6 as they lost to NC State. They do have a 2-0 record versus the top 25, as well as a win over number 2 Clemson. 3-1 in the ACC, and a huge game this week versus Florida State, as that will have a major impact on who is playing in the conference title game later this year. Number 18, Syracuse, 4-2. If there is a team out there more confusing than Syracuse, please let me know. Wins over number 6 Clemson and number 7 Florida State, but losses in the conference to Miami and Georgia Tech. However, the Tech loss isn't looking so bad as of late, and Miami is starting to win games. 2-0 versus top 10 teams, but 2-2 in conference play. Next up is the ACC resident punching bag, North Carolina. Look for Syracuse to get to 5-2. Number 17, California, 4-2. They had their 4-game winning streak snapped at the hands of number 19, Washington last week. The Golden Bears are 3-1 in conference play and against ranked teams. Cal has been ranked since Week 3. They will play their 5th ranked team on the year this week when they take on Washington State. Number 16, Florida State, 4-2. The Seminoles enter Week 7 riding a 3-game winning streak. 0-1 versus ranked teams this year, however 3-1 in the ACC. 10th most points scored on the year, and will need to put up a bunch this week as they have a huge game against Virginia Tech. The winner will be going to 4-1 in the ACC and staying on top of the conference. Number 15, Vanderbilt, 4-2. Since beating Florida in Week 4 and climbing to the number 1 spot, the Commodores have now dropped 2 straight and dropped to 1-2 versus top 25 competition, as well as 2-2 in the conference. They will need a win this week to keep pace in the SEC. It appears they will get just that, as a tanking South Carolina team is up next. Look for Vandy to get to 5-2. Number 14, Washington State, 4-2. The Cougars have won 2 in a row. This team has never been unranked and have 2 of the better wins on their resume, as they have taken down Ohio State and UCLA. They are 1-1 on the year versus ranked teams and 3-1 in the Pac-12. They get Cal this week, with the winner going to 4-1 in the conference. Number 13, LSU, 4-2. This week's featured team on Stockwatch, the Tigers now have the attention of the rest of the country. They have found a bit of luck, as they have the lowest points against in the land. Nonetheless, you still have to beat the team seated across from you at the table, and LSU has done just that. 3-1 versus ranked teams, 4-0 in the SEC. They look to make it 5 straight this week versus Tennessee, who was on a 3-game winning streak of their own. Number 12, Michigan, 4-2. After being mentioned last week that the Wolverines didn't face a ranked team yet, they got their first chance versus number 1 Nebraska, and they didn't disappoint. Having now won 2 straight, the second highest scoring team in the Big Ten will look to keep pace as they take on Rutgers this week, who just took out number 24 Penn State. Number 11, Washington, 4-2. After losing to UCLA, the Huskies bounced back by taking out number 9 Cal. That improved them to 2-1 versus ranked teams and 3-1 in Pac-12 play. The Huskies will look to make it 2 straight this week versus Arizona. And number 10, Clemson, 4-2. The Tigers snapped their losing streak last week with an absolute beatdown of North Carolina, as we saw earlier tonight. The third highest scoring team in the league improved to 2-2 in the ACC and stay within a game of the leaders. They will look to get to 3-2 in the conference as they take on Notre Dame in Week 7. Number 9, Kansas, 5-1. The Jayhawks had their 5-game winning streak snapped last week by Texas. Kansas, still one of 3 teams in the country with a 2-0 record versus top 10 teams. They will look to make that 3-0 as they take on red-hot Oklahoma, who was ranked 3rd last week. We asked Kansas booster DJ Khaled if he wanted to win this week in the upcoming top 10 battle. He responded simply, another one. Number 8, UCLA, 4-2. The Bruins were upset last week by Arizona State. UCLA is the only team in the country with multiple high weeks. They are currently the number 2 ranked offense in the country, also currently sit 2-2 in the Pac-12. Up next, a possible Pac-12 conference title game preview, as they have the Oregon Ducks up next. Number 7, Alabama, 4-2. After taking out number 1 Vanderbilt in Week 5, the Crimson Tide took out Florida in Week 6. They're now 3-1 versus both top 25 teams and the SEC. The Tide have been ranked since week 3. Up next, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 6, Nebraska 5-1. They were the latest number 1 team to get taken out. The Cornhuskers had their 5-game winning streak snapped by Michigan. They know how it feels now, as they took out number 1 Michigan State earlier this year. Nebraska has been blessed by a very favorable schedule to this point. The good fortunes continue as they face Maryland next, who has been allergic to offense this season. And that brings us to the top 5, and coming in at number 5, Ohio State 5-1. Getting their first opportunity versus a ranked team, the Buckeyes didn't disappoint. They took out number 18 Michigan State and were rewarded with their first ever appearance in the top 5. They have now won 5 straight, including all 4 Big Ten games to this point. Coach Mayoral will look to stay perfect in the Big Ten as they take on the Iowa Hawkeyes this week. Number 4, Oregon 5-1. Since losing to Cal in week 3, Coach Lang has flipped his team upside down. They made 3 trades with USC in 3 weeks. Since the Cal loss, the Ducks have scored less than 1,031 points, which has moved them to the 8th highest scoring team in the country. The Ducks are 2-1 versus top 25 teams and 3-1 in Pac-12 play. They get their hardest test of the season this week as number 8 UCLA is up next. Number 3 Tennessee 5-1. The Volunteers are on a 3-game winning streak and fresh off a win versus number 25 Auburn. 2-1 versus ranked teams, 3-1 versus the SEC. Tennessee is the 7th best offense and will need it this week as 13th ranked LSU is up next in a huge game in the SEC. Tennessee needs this one to pass LSU in the conference standings. Number 2, Oklahoma 5-1. The Sooners received 3 first-place votes this week and improved to 2-0 versus top 25 teams after taking out number 12, Texas Tech. The Sooners were my preseason number 1 team, and they have not disappointed in the slightest. Coach Glenn has his team firing on all cylinders as they are the highest scoring team in the country. 2-0 versus ranked teams, 4-0 versus the Big 12. The Sooners get Kansas up next and can give themselves a 2-game cushion over the Jayhawks with a win. And number 1 in the country, Arkansas 5-1. The Razorbacks received 7 first-place votes this week. After Nebraska fell last week, that opened the door for the Hogs to slide up to the number 1 spot. As we found out, with this blessing, it's also a curse. It's trending towards becoming Tino's version of the Madden curse. Arkansas is now 2-0 versus top 25 teams and 4-0 in the SEC. They bolstered up their defense a little bit this week by acquiring cornerback Buster Skrine. The Hogs have the 4th best offense in the country and will look to make their stay at the top longer than those that have come before. Auburn is up next and will look to put an impressive win on their resume. And that'll do it for Week 6 in TinoNCAA. We'll be back next week to recap Week 7. For all of us here at Tino Studios, I'm Bucky Shanks, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.